All right, welcome. Today is our Platinum Tips and Tricks webinar. So today what I'm going to be doing is basically going over a lot of the interface kind of shortcuts, a lot of the different features that are now kind of baked into the interface that you may or may not be aware of. And then of course, if there's any questions that come up along the way, I'll kind of go through our chat room, as we're kind of going along, if questions come up that are related, or I'll wait till the end to kind of cover those in more detail. So first of all, of course, welcome. And if you're not aware, we do have a Platinum Tips help guide. So we do have a new, basically a new help site that we're working on. It's called support.workamajig.com. You can go there and search for a guide called Tips or Platinum Tips. And right at the top, we'll kind of show you a list of the items that we're going to kind of go through to start the call off today, such as, if you're a new user, you're onboarding people, how to kind of use the browser features, not just what's within Workamajig, to take more advantage over what the interface can do. And we'll kind of go from there. So I'm going to hop back over to my login. So I'm logged into my test site for today. And what we have here is just the Today Creatives page. Hopefully we're all familiar with this page. But some of the things that, let's say you have somebody new that's starting, they're creative, you need to show them how to kind of use the interface. A lot of times I hear, you kind of just give them a login and they go here and they're on their own. If that's the case, what I would do is I would kind of direct your users then to go to the kind of the onboarding or kind of walkthroughs that we have. So in the upper right corner of your toolbar, there was a little blue eye. So if you click on that, it gives you kind of options of, well, I need to know how to, how do I enter, time? That's always a big one. Add time using the time entry cards that we see on the Today Creative. So we can kind of go through that, and it'll give you a step-by-step of how to do that. Now, it's not a perfect system, but at least it kind of gives people in the right direction of where they can do things in the system, and how to navigate and where to click. So it is kind of a useful tool. But at the same time, I would also suggest, if you're having new users, definitely have some kind of like internal documentation of how you want your users to use the system in that specific case. But worst case scenario, or at the very least, we do have that kind of walkthrough that your users can use. And additionally, you can use it for other things, not just time entry, but you have billing questions or accounting questions. So there's more detailed information in here than just time entry. All right, very good. So if we're in the interface, well, what are some of the differences, at least between more of our classic and Platinum interface? And so a lot of that comes down to these Today pages. Is really kind of replacing, what we might have had as our dashboard in the classic interface. So what you might have used to have known as, let's say, widgets in the classic interface, they're now all kind of baked into this page, or hard-coded, if you will, so you can't move them around. So you have the My Task widget, for example. You have Conversations, which was activities in classic. There's the daily feed. You have your schedule, your meetings for today, and today's time. So all of that has been kind of rebuilt into these Today pages. So all the Today pages are going to have similar outline on them. So that's just good to know that regardless of what Today page you're on, you're able to see your schedule, your calendar meetings, your time entries for today, and kind of move on through there. But of course, each Today page has its own kind of unique property. The Today Creative, of course, is very much focused on your tasks, time entry. But if I were to navigate through the main menu, so that's the upper left corner there, I go to Project Manager, I go to Today Project Manager. So again, it's another Today page, but yet the layout of the page is definitely different than what we saw on the Today Creatives. And that's by design because of what each role is going to be focusing on in the system. So now, of course, this is my test site, so I got all kinds of records populating every which item I can on here. So your mileage may vary of what you see. Hopefully you don't see all these unapproved things and things waiting for approval on your screen. So that's just my my test site there. Now, when we're kind of navigating through, so let's say I'm a project manager, but I also work on my tasks. Well, like the Today Project Manager, we actually have a link to My Tasks, which what it does is it really just opens up the Today Creative right on top of here. So I could just click on that, do my time entry, complete my tasks. Okay, let me just back out and go back to my Today Project Manager page. So we do understand that there is a need for having multiple Today pages open in that respect. So one trick you can do here is say, well, okay, I want both of these pages open at the same time. I don't want to have to keep, going from one to the other and navigating each time to do that. So a trick you can do is hold the control key if you're on a Windows computer. I think it's a, was that Command Shift, I think is what it is on a Mac. But on a Windows computer, what I can do is I can click on a link holding the control key. So for example, I'll click on this link for my tasks, and it will actually open it up into a new tab in my browser. So this way I have the Today Creatives open, and I have Today Project Manager open. So this is the closest resemblance if you were familiar with the classic interface. You'd have Windows open within the interface. Well, because we don't have this within the interface, now what we're really saying is the browser is the interface, and we're just opening up more tabs within the browser. So this is a great way you can kind of see multiple things of what's going on. An example, let's say, I also want to see my projects page. So again, you can also do this through the main menu. Go to the main menu, go to Project Manager. I'm going to hold the control key and click on projects. And again, I open up a third tab now, and there's my projects. So this way I can have everything I need open on my browser at one time. I got my Today Project Manager. I want to be aware of alerts, things that are going on. I want my Today Creatives, so I see my tasks, enter my time. And of course, there's the project list. I need to kind of scan this every now and then to see, if anything's changed, or maybe I'm viewing this a specific way. All right, well, very good. So at this point, we have 3 browser tabs open, and it's great. You can just kind of click through and keep them open, and they'll kind of refresh on about a 15-minute basis. So everything kind of keeps current with what you're looking at. However, you don't want to have to do that every time you log into your browser. You don't have to control-click open, just to get your browser the way you want it. Now, note that, again, the mileage may vary on what browser you are using. But within each browser that, all the main browsers anyway, like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, they all have the ability in their settings. So if you go into their options, for example, there are settings in here where you're able to remember what tabs you had open. And I forget where it was on this one. Hang on one second here. Maybe it was under one of the better tabs here. I always forget. Yeah, so home page and new windows. So once you have the browser tabs open, you can just say, okay, just copy the current pages that are there, and it'll open up all of those pages on startup. So that way you don't have to keep, every time you open browser, you don't have to reset, how you had your tabs again. You can just have it automatically open to have those browsers already going. So that's a nice little trick there. I know I use that myself. That way I start my browser, everything loads up, and I just kind of flip through the tabs that I need. Now, when we're talking about this menu, now note that I'm logged in as an admin, so I'm seeing everything under the sun under here. But you can actually customize your menu here. That is more of an admin option. But if you want to say, you know what, I don't want my creative staff to have to click on creatives, then go to Today Creatives. I just want this Today Creatives dot to be here at the top. You can actually do that. We do have our custom menu feature. That is under our admin manager. So again, maybe not everybody can access that, but just a little nice little visual here. So if I go to System Setup, I'm going to do a search for our custom menu. And our custom menus, I can say, how do I want to have, let's say, our creatives. Let's go to Creative Production. Here's how I want them to see their main menu. I can say, let's add an item. I just want them to have Today Creative and maybe Projects. I just want them to have those 2 dots. I don't want them going anywhere else in the system, at least by default. And so I can set that as their default view of their main menu. Now, I'm not logged into the Creative Production group, so I won't see this change, but I can change this per security group. So if I leave a group blank, it's just going to show everything that they have access to. But if I override it, they'll just see those 2 dots to start with. Now, on that note, let me open up the main menu again. Let's say I just saw those 2 dots only and nothing else, but they will still have the ability to click on Show All Apps in the bottom right corner, and that will reset their apps of what they have access to, or turn off the custom menu real quick to show you their full menu selection. So keep in mind that they can still access whatever they have security rights to access if they click Show All Apps. But at least by default, you can give them a custom menu where they just see a specific couple of dots that you want them to get to. So again, there's different ways you can kind of go about it. I personally like, setting up the different tabs, having my browser remember it. But you can also create a custom menu and do a couple of different fun things there. Now, if you may have noticed, in my upper left corner, my menu has its own custom name as well. So a lot of users don't know that they can rename their site here. By default, it just says Workamajig. But for fun, you can go in there into our system setup again under visual appearance. There'll be application name. And so you can just put in whatever you want here, and that'll override what's listed as the main menu. A lot of times we'll just put your company name goes up there. So however you want to customize that, just add some fun to it. Now, knowing that we do have kind of these 3 tabs that I have here, let's say there's one tab that, if I were to log into Workamajig without having my browser that I have set up currently, I'm kind of on the road and I'm just logging into a computer or whatnot, what browser or what page do I want to have as my default page? So by default, the Today Creatives is everyone's default page when they first log into Workamajig. But you can click on your username in the upper right corner. And in here, is there a section called Default Page. So, right now I have my default page set as Today Project Manager. But let's say I want Today Creative to be my default. I can just click on that blue link. It'll show me all the pages I have access to currently. I can kind of scroll through that list and say, oh, you know what? Today Creatives. That should be my default. So you can change your default at any time. But keep in mind that every page you go to does have a unique URL. So I have seen this where a user might create or set a certain default page, but then they open up their browser and it always takes them to a different page. Well, one reason that might be because maybe you bookmarked the wrong page. So every page I go to does have a unique URL. Like you can see, it says Today Creative in the URL. If I click on the Today Project Manager, it says Today PM in the URL. So if you bookmark and you're accessing Workamajig through your bookmarks, then that might be one reason for that. But while we're discussing bookmarks, that's also another way you could utilize the system in your browser of pages you like to navigate to. So instead of having to always go to that main menu, you can bookmark any page that you have open. Now what's nice about this, I'm not just saying you're limited to just certain pages from the menu. You're actually able to say there's a certain report I like. So for example, I'm going to go into my everyone. I'm going to go to my report center. I'm going to go into my custom reports. And let's say I have this custom report that I like to run. I like to see and see what's going on here, manage it, monitor it, whatever I need to do. Well, notice that the URL is now specific to this custom report. So I can actually bookmark this link and open up this report whenever I want. I don't have to I don't have to navigate to it. I don't have to go to the report center, other reports, find the report, click it, run it. I could just have the report set to auto run. I like to have that anyway. Let me turn that on. So I like to have it just auto run. So whenever I open up that report, it just goes. And again, I'll do the trick where I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to click on this report. Oh, should have opened it up into a new tab. It didn't. All right, I'm not sure why it didn't open a new tab, but I have seen it work. And again, you can bookmark just this report and you'll be able to have that report be its own tab, something you can just click on, run anytime you need. Let's see, and will the report update with current data every time? Well, every time you run the report, yes, but it doesn't just, it doesn't update in the background. That's not how the custom reports work. So that was just a question I saw there real quick. All right, very good. Let me kind of go back to my Platinum tips. What else do we have here? So we have the default page, bookmarks. Oh yeah, copying and pasting formatting. So this comes up a lot where, and this isn't just a Workamajig or Platinum issue. I see this with all kinds of other applications too, is where when you're copying and pasting from other documents, files, or whatever, websites, and you're pasting that text into Workamajig as like, let's say a conversation more specifically, I tend to see a lot of issues with the formatting. So let me go into a project here. I'll just grab whatever I got. So you can have these conversations, and when you're creating a conversation and you're kind of putting in your message here, there is a kind of a keyboard shortcut you can do of Control-Shift-V. And what that would do is that would copy and paste without formatting. So what that means is, let's say I go back here, I want to grab all of this. I'm going to copy that, what I just highlighted. I'm going to go into my new post and paste it. Well, notice how all the formatting is there. There's bold, there's blue hyperlinks, there's all kinds of things in there. So that may not translate well when you save it and the system tries to email your users. So one tip you can do, let me back out of it. If I'm creating a new conversation, in the body, when I click Control-Shift-V, now it's just all plain text. So it kind of strips out all that formatting of HTML or whatever you're copying from, and just puts the plain text in there. And this tends to be a little bit more digestible when you're adding information and especially emailing it back out. Because then if you're copying and pasting formatting, the formatting is not only in this post, but now when you email it out, now their email readers have to interpret, the formatting of, the Workamajig conversation in addition to the formatting of the text within the email. So it gets a little interesting at times, I'll say. But that's just a nice little trick to just kind of copy and paste without formatting. Now again, that's on the Windows machine. It's Control-Shift-V. For the Mac, it's I think it's Control-Shift-Tab-V or something like that. There's 4 buttons you have to hold on your keyboard. But once you get the hang of it, it's pretty quick to just do that for pasting. All right, very good. On rare occasions, we have a way to reset the app. And what that means is just saying, okay, maybe some security rights have changed, or we're on our own server and we just updated our server, and so if things are seeming a little odd, what you can always do is you can just go into. Let me back out of this real quick here. You can just go to the end of any of the URLs that you're at, and just put and reset into the end of it, and then I'll actually log you out, take you back to the login page, can sign back in. Takes you back to the page you were just at. And that tends to help out if you ever run into any issues where you're just seeing some oddities going on. That just helps to kind of clear out anything in the cache or kind of like your browser cookie and different things along those lines. So, all right, very good. Browser start page, we already kind of gone over that. Oh, okay. So going over creating like a shortcut app on your smartphones. There's a whole guide on how to do that for Android and iPhones. There's a way you can say open up in your phone the browser. Let me go on down there. So if you're on your phone, you happen to go to your browser and say, okay, let me bookmark this, or let me. Oh, sorry, it's up one more. So yeah, we have a whole guide on this one specifically. There we go. So there's ways to create a page where you would log in, and then you can have that appear as kind of like almost like an app on your device. So you would go into your Safari browser, for example, log in, do all that kind of stuff. But then from that page itself, you can say, add to home screen, and that will make it appear like an app on your phone. So that's kind of cool. So even though our mobile interface is, still in a web browser, you can use the features of the browser on your phone to make it appear as an app. And again, you can do that on Android as well. So that's kind of a cool little thing you can do there. All right, let me go back to the previous page. There's a couple just little oddities, like Safari has kind of an interesting thing with the tab key. There's things about if you're using if you're in private mode or incognito, there's different things to consider of how the browser may or may not store anything, of course. But going into a little bit more of the details here, so like zooming text, resizing columns and whatnot, and custom reports, let's dive into there for a little bit. So let's go back into our report center. I'm going to run this report again. Now, if you happen to be on your browser and you're just looking at the screen and saying it's a little hard to read, I want to kind of make the font a little bigger, what you can do is you can just use, again, your browser features. So I'm on Firefox here, but in Chrome it's very similar. You'd click on the 3 dots and you'll say zoom. So I can actually just click on the plus sign and say, let's just make this a little bigger. And you can see the text definitely gets bigger in that respect, but it has to try to resize for the space you're looking at. Now, note that when you are resizing your browser, you could, turn the browser into the mobile mode. So keep in mind that if the width of the browser gets too narrow, it's going to flip into the mobile version. So if you're having to move Workamajig away from your other windows, I would suggest just kind of moving it to the side, but don't resize it down. because again, that will kind of change the reactive design to go into mobile mode. So, all right, getting a little bit more into, let's say, our custom reports. Oh, does that work the same way in iPad? Correct. So the iPad size is considered to be the mobile mode. So if you are working on that kind of a device, it would flip you down to that size. So that is correct. All right, very good. So some details with custom reports. I mean, everybody ends up in custom reports at some point in time and to create something very specific of what they're looking at. Now, this report I have is kind of nonsensical. There's not really a purpose to it other than I just needed a report. But when you do get into reports and you have all kinds of data showing and you want it to show a specific way, there are just some tips and tricks where you can kind of click on the column. You can sort the columns by just clicking on it a couple of times. You can see an arrow appear of how you want to click on it and show it. Sometimes, though, the column may be not wide enough, for example. So you can just click onto the sidebar of it, just click and hold, and you'll see the whole report kind of grays out a little bit, and you have the handlebar. Now note that you can only drag the right handlebar of each field. Okay, so you can't drag the left over. You'd have to drag the right handlebar over of how far you want it, and there you go. Now that's just going to kind of save that for kind of your view. So next time you run the report, it'll be that wide. But if you happen to be printing this, if you still use paper, if you happen to be printing this, note that the printout may not be that wide. So I'll print it out. You can see, the task, so you can see the project name, all that's really squeezed down. So that's into your report settings. If I go back into edit and modify this report, oh, it's nice and blank. Let me reopen my report there. Hold on, let me refresh my browser. Maybe I need to do the reset, see? All right, let's go back into our report. There it goes. Let's edit this guy again. Okay, so when we're in here, we have the ability to say, you know what, whenever I print this, so I'm going to click into one of these rows, note that there's a print width. So I can say, oh, okay, if I'm printing this to a PDF for printing purposes onto a paper, you can imagine if you have, let's say, 8.5 wide paper. Well, I want all the columns to be under, let's say, 8 inches. So we can make this one be 3 inches, task name be 3 inches, so that's 6, 7, 8 total. So it's 8 inches wide. And now if I print it, now we can see, okay, I'm using the full width of the report, all 8 inches. So that way you have the project name, task full name, because those are the ones with the longer names. Everything else can just be, the width of the column that is there. Now, if you do want to have things sorting a specific way, so let's say I want it to sort the task name and then the allocated hours. Oh, well, I can't do that just by clicking, on each column. So note that if you click on a column here, you're just sorting by that column alone. However, if you want it to do a double sort or, sort, multiple columns, you do have to edit the report to do that. So if you get into the editing of the report, this one I've already set them up to have a sort order. So I click on the task full name. So this is sort order 1. So it's going to sort that column first. Any of those columns that are the same, it'll then sort the next column after that. So you can set the sort order, per column there. So that's the way you want it to run. You have to kind of hard code that into your columns, and that will help you do kind of multi-sorting. All right, very good. Let me switch back over here. We talked about the multi-sorting, custom reports. Oh, so custom report searching. So let's go through that a little bit too. So one of the nice things about when you're diving into the report side of the system, if I'm going in and modifying this report, instead of having all the available columns on the left that you have to kind of read through, now you can actually say, let's insert a column, and I need to find all of the fields that contain, let's say, hours. Okay, great. Well, there's budgeted hours, hours billed, original budget hours. So there's all kinds of fields with the word hours in it that you can select from. So now you don't have to kind of go through and scroll through the whole list to figure out what sounds right. You can just do a kind of a keyword search and find all the fields that have that word in it now. So that's kind of definitely a nice way of enhancing the report center further. There's all kinds of other, tricks we can do here in reports. I know we've had a kind of a recent webinar on custom reports. Hopefully we'll have one more on the advanced features, such as calculated columns, calculated groups, calculation after for filters. So there's a lot there. If you have questions on that, or you're looking to do something specific with your report, I'd always just say, email your account manager, just support@workamajig.com. Let them know what you're looking for. Where can you kind of get some guidance on what report to use, and if there's something specific or tricky you're trying to do. So very good. Let me go back one more time. All right, so two more main notes that I have to talk about. So when we're looking at, let's go back to our Today Creative. So with the way the interface is set up, you would have administrators that would have full access to the system. They'd be able to go through and set up different pages to work certain ways. And so what I mean by that is, let's say I'm the administrator, and I want my creatives to be using, let's say, the Today Creatives a specific way. So while there are security rights to say, well, who can add time to completed tasks, who can add time to, tasks that are not assigned, there's all kinds of security rights for very minute details. But let's say on this page specifically, how do I want this page to behave for all of my users? Well, I would first have to navigate to the page in question. In this case, I'm on the Today Creatives. So if I'm the administrator, it's not about what I see on my page right now. It's about how I want it to work as a system-wide. So from the More button on the Today Creatives, I can go to More, System Settings. And on here, I'm going to see, as a company default, here's how I want this page to behave for everyone. So however I set this up will be the default for the company. However, you could set up users differently. So let's say, all right, our creative production, I want them to work a little bit different. Or maybe the company default works for our creative production, so we don't need to change it. However, we do have maybe some vendors or freelancers. Well, when they use this system, I want them using it a little bit different. So I'm going to override them specifically and say, okay, I don't want them to be able to assign themselves tasks or see anything they shouldn't. So you can really kind of trim down, what settings you want them to be able to see or use in that case. And so that way, whenever that type of user is logged in, they'll just see just the basic information. So you do have a lot of options in terms of how you want people specifically to use each page. Now, when you do try to save it from the system setting, you're going to get two options here. You're going to get Save, Leave User Settings, and that refers to the display options, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So if you don't want to change people's display options, you could click on the green Save, Leaving User Settings. However, if your users have overridden their display options, then you could say, let's save and reset all of those options back to what I have as my default here. I'm going to go ahead and click the red one, Save Resetting User Settings. And basically what that does is it just takes all of your users, when they log in and they're on the Today Creatives, they may not see system settings, but they will see display options. So display options is basically, what are the user settings of this page? So me as now the creative user, I can actually go in here under More Display Options. Well, there's the defaults that I can change, but more importantly, these are the defaults that we under system settings, we just kind of overrode. We say, set this back to the default settings, but your users, keep in mind, can still come in here and change a couple of things. But notice that their options are, of course, very limited. They can just kind of change, maybe what date range of tasks they want to see, are tasks completed or not, predecessor-wise. So a couple of things that they can toggle on and off here, but obviously not as many settings as the system settings had. So that's just one of the many areas where things are a little bit different in the Platinum interface. Additionally, not only will you see kind of those options from each of these main pages, but you'll also see that from every page you access. So what that means in addition to that is, let's say I go into my task card. Here's the task details. Under the More option, I'm going to see system settings again. So I can actually adjust how I want the task details page to work for my users. Let's say I don't need them to see the daily feed or the team through here. I just want them to see the overview and maybe the file section. So you can kind of scroll through and you can kind of check what you want your users to be able to see and do in this specific page. So again, keep in mind though, it's not about what you see on this page as an administrator, but it's about controlling what you want your users to see overall when they're accessing this type of page specifically. So it gets a little interesting because a lot of times we'll have users kind of click in to further details, and there'll be more options to change within there. So sometimes some of those options get a little buried, but always check the more and system settings if you're ever trying to fine tune a specific page that your users have access to. All right, very good. I think there's one last thing. Let me go back to the Platinum tips here. Last thing was that kind of a conversation note versus email. So it's just if you use conversations heavily in the system, let me go into my conversations tab. I got a whole bunch that are open. So when you're creating a conversation that's outside of a project, when you're inside of a project, it behaves a specific way. But if you are just kind of taking down some notes or conversations in the system, you do have some differences in terms of how that can work. So it's like a shortcut on creating a conversation if just for yourself, or note-taking, or maybe you're in sales and you're just trying to kind of jot something down. When I'm trying to add a new record to the system, because I don't have the Add Conversations panel right here. So since I have the option to add conversations, I can click on my plus sign up here. And this allows me to add a new record in the system for anything I have access to. And of course, one of them is right under my top there, under everyone, is conversation. So when I open up a conversation panel, I'm going to have two tabs. There's note and there is email. Now, really the difference here is note is saying this is more for internal use. I just want to kind of document, either a phone call I had or just something specific. I can tag it to a project. It would potentially show up in the project conversations. There is kind of another, just so you know, there's another system level setting that can kind of control that. But ultimately, I could just put in kind of a note of what's going on. Now, if I email it to people, keep in mind that because it's on note, it's going to give a lot more information in the footer of that email message of, this will be, any replies will go to this conversation and yada, yada, yada. It'll have a lot more detail under there. So this is where email came about. So email is more if you're going to be emailing your clients from Workamajig. So this way, it's basically the same thing. It's very basic in terms of, I just want a subject. I want to put a message. I'm going to choose my contact to email to, and I'm going to send it out. Now, the difference, of course, when you have email and you send it this way, the footer is very simplified. It'll still have the, kind of those hash marks with the, keep it in this post number, but it doesn't give any more detail about, is this a conversation? Is this or that? It just says, please don't delete, and, has a little code. So it gives very little information in terms of what it is, but it's still there. So that way, if they reply, their reply would go back to that conversation. Now I see a couple of questions came up with this. Let me just check here real quick. Why would you have a conversation in the system outside of a specific project? That's a great question. And I would say, you don't have to. These are just some of the features that some clients use them for different ways. Again, conversations, I would say, is more of a, outside of a project. Conversations is more of a sales tool, more for just kind of documenting, okay, here's things that I have that I'm reminding myself. So a conversation can be used for certain internal things such as sales. However, correct, I would say if conversations are project heavy, then you can kind of ignore the conversations tab and just say, what, we're just going to focus on conversations on projects, because that will light up my tasks that there's a new update. If somebody adds a conversation to my task, these task cards actually light up that there's a new update. You'd click on it. You'd see under conversations, oh, there's an unread message here. You could click on it, read it. Then that kind of alert goes away. So just know that conversations is very wide in how it can be used. But ultimately, yeah, there's lots of different ways it can be used. Let's see, speaking of conversations, why, if I add someone to my list of people to send conversation to, it disappears as I begin to type and have, I'm not sure, that sounds maybe like a bug. The only other thing I can think of is that if you're creating a conversation and you're adding contacts to that conversation, let me just go back into that panel real quick there. So if I'm adding contacts to my conversation, and when I send it, the contact is removed, that is because the conversation was not checked visible to clients. So by default, visible to clients is not checked on conversations because you don't want to accidentally email your client of some internal discussion you're having. So that is off by default. But if that's off and I send this, it will remove the contact from the email list. So I don't know if that was the question there. Let's see. So we're just going through some questions here now. Is there a video conversations? We can always, do a more in-depth webinar on conversations if you're interested on that. But at the same time, I would, also suggest, emailing your account manager and say, hey, I'd like to find more info on conversations. Or if you're also, better yet, if you're looking for something specific for conversations to fulfill, let us know what you're trying to do. Because most likely there is a process for that. Let's see, do you only get the new update highlight on your task page if a conversation is attached? Okay. So kind of a neat question. So with these task cards, when it says there's updates, let me scroll through. Do I have any? Again, this is my user data. Yeah, there we go. So for example, if on this task, or better yet on this project, something is added, it'll say there's new updates. Well, what's the new update? We'll have to click on the task card to find out. I can see there's 2 new spec sheets. Now, keep in mind that it's only going to alert me of what other users have done. So if I add a conversation to this project, well, it's not going to tell me there's an update because I'm the one that added it, so the system assumes I know what I did. But if someone else adds a conversation to this task, then it will show that there's a new update. So now, I believe the updates, this trigger here is only triggered by specs, conversations, to-dos. I think that is the extent of it at this time. Is there any way to have the data in the Today Creatives automatically update? Well, it'll auto refresh every 15 minutes. So there is a refresh button though, right here, kind of in the kind of top center, if you will. That'll refresh the data on this page. So if you're running into issues where you're entering time on the wrong day, are you leaving this page open overnight? I would say, make sure to not, stay logged in. But if you're having that issue, we would have to know more details of how that's happening. So, all right, very good. Last thing we didn't really get into. Can it be set to refresh more than 15 minutes? Unfortunately, no. That's kind of hard coded into the UI. If you have feedback or questions on that, you can always just email us, support@workamajig.com with your feedback. Let us know what you think or what you're looking to accomplish. And no, unfortunately, there's not a way to change the color from all white. That's been, that's kind of, I guess, the trend is what we noticed. That's why we went with kind of this kind of more generic, if you will, kind of look and feel, just kind of the white and black. But we don't have a way to control the colors at this time. Again, that's great feedback, though. If you want to pass that along and make suggestions of what do you want to be able to kind of control or customize, we would love to hear some of that feedback. All right, a couple last other tips here to try out is going through our toolbar. A lot of items get missed on our toolbar. Again, we know that we can kind of navigate to the menu. We could create custom menus. We can open up a new browser tabs. So there's a lot there that we can already do. But if we're trying to, let's say I'm trying to find some specific data in the system. Well, that's where we now have our kind of our global search, a little spyglass that brings up the search window. So we can do a global search and say, okay, I need to find everything with the word test in it. It'll show me all my campaigns, projects, invoices, whatever I got. So I have a lot of stuff in here. And again, notice how this page has a system settings because I'm an administrator. So again, I can control what my users can search for. Now, again, this is my test site, so I just opened everything wide up. But you might want to say, okay, well, my creatives, they don't need to see everything. I just want them to see projects only. They don't even need, maybe they don't even need to look for inactive projects. So you can kind of really trim down what they can search for in this screen. But within this screen, you can do a global search. You can see kind of about the last 20 items you've opened anything from a report to a project to one of these task detail cards. All of that information will show up in your recent. Additionally, kind of a couple updates ago, we actually added views here to the search menu. Now, views is something that you're going to notice more if you were on a different page, such as, let's say let's go to our project manager. So today, project manager on the left-hand side, if I scroll down, I see views, but it's limited, if you will, to views that are related to a project manager. But again, let's say I'm trying to find vendor invoices, or I'm trying to find some other kind of thing that's not really related to a project manager. Well, that global search under views will show you not only everything that was in project manager, but everything else that you have access to. So I can kind of scroll through this list and go, oh, well, there's my vendor invoices. Oh, great. Let me go all my invoices. And again, you could use the global search, but the views also allow you to say, I need to find all invoices. I need to find invoice 1234. Okay, great. There's my invoices with 1234 is the invoice number. Let me open them up and let me make some adjustments or whatever I need to pull from. But that's just another way you can utilize the search area. Is you can not only search for records, but you can also be more surgical and say, let me open up this specific view of data and let me kind of search from there. All right, let's see, we got a couple other questions here now. Let's see, can we add a keyword filter and project type filter to exclude certain tasks? So you're asking for like a keyword filter. That gets really into the custom reporting. So you could, in a sense, say, okay, if I'm looking for, better yet, if you're saying projects, let's talk about our projects. So if I'm making I want to find specific projects, correct. I could go to my all projects view. I could have a filter in here that says, exclude everything with a certain project type. Let's see, do we have project type here already? I do not. So let me modify this report. In my filters, let's add type. And there's my project type. So I could say it's equal to, or it's, any of, let me just. So if you're looking for projects with a specific project type, you could say like any of, for example. And now when I go into my filter, there's my project types. I could say, okay, I just need events and brochure collateral. I don't need anything else. I just want projects with those two types, and I can run a report that will show just that. So there's two ways to go about it. Do you want to make the filter say include or exclude? So hopefully that was good for that response there. You can, again, the filter reports, you can get more and more specific with those, but that's just the gist of it. Is there a view where I can see all POs and search sort time period? Good question. So I would say, yeah, that'd be in your views. You'd go into your purchasing, for example, go into orders. That's the purchase orders. Say, let me find all. And there should be a filter for PO date already. So that would say, show me all the POs that are between April 1st and April 30th, for example. I may not have any in here. I do not. So I'll make it April 1st from 2018. I should have some data. There we go. So here's the last year's worth of POs that I have in the system. So now, again, keep in mind that this is just a PO level report. So I'm not seeing individual line detail. This is just all POs. All right, I think that was good for that one. Let's move on. The filters question is about the today creatives. Oh, okay, today creatives. Let's go back in there. So if you're having questions of what information you're seeing here, yeah, I mean, it kind of, you have to do a little bit of playing around with what you want to see here. When you're getting into how you want your users seeing today creatives, know that by default, let me go into the system settings here. By default, our settings are set to due on or before today, don't show completed predecessors, a couple of things like that. And then it groups by due date, sorts it by priority. So there's different ways that the system can be toggled here. That's just kind of the default. Now, my preference, I like to put the date range to start on or before today. One reason for that is, let's say you have a, let's just say you have a 10-day task. Well, you put you put it to due on or before today, well, it'll never be due today because it's a 10-day task. So putting it to start on or before today, helps to show you that, oh, hey, here's a task that started. It'll still show its due date, and it's grouped by the due date. So you can still see that information, but you're saying, show me all the tasks that start on or before today. So I think that's a great place to start if you're trying to show people everything they have going on, not just things that are due in the future, if you will. And for example, if I said, due on or before a week from today, well, again, if it was a 10-day task, I still may not see it because this would only look a week out, not 10 days out. So a lot of interesting things can kind of happen there. I don't suggest putting it to all, but I know that's kind of a last resort that I see a lot of users do it. They just put it to all, show everything that you have assigned, but then this list becomes very huge and a little bit more challenging to manage. Now, one thing you can also take advantage of is not just focusing on the date range of what you're seeing, but how you want it to be displayed. So again, the default is by due date, but you could change that to be by project or even client. So that way you have a grouping of tasks under a different heading. I'll even save that. So let's go with our grouping up by client. So now I can see, okay, here's all the projects for this test client. Let me scroll down. Here's everything for this client. So there's just a lot of neat ways you can kind of set up the system based on, again, how your business kind of operates or how your focus needs to be. The default is just the default. It's just set to due date. But you can play around with different things, different features based on what you're needing or looking for at that time. Hopefully that helps to answer that question further. Let's see. We're able to customize the columns in the budget view. Oh, great question, great question. So let's get into a project here. So in a project, we want to go to our budget, for example. Where are you? There you are. Let's open up our budget. Any moment now. There's our budget. So great question. So when you're in a screen like this, and again, this comes down to again, if you're familiar with like the classic interface, sure, everyone could customize their own budget view. We kind of took that away and we made it more of a system setting. So now, if your budget view doesn't have the columns you're looking for, as an administrator, you'd go into any project budget, click on the more, and you'll have system settings. So there's a security right for system settings, by the way, specifically. So you can give users that setting, but know that they'll have system settings on every page they have access to. So it's really meant for an admin to be kind of setting this up. But under the budget view, go to system settings, and here I'm going to see edit columns. Now this is broken out by, we have 4 views of the budget. So let's go to by type. That's kind of one more of my favorite views. So if I go by type, go back to my system settings, note that I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to see that's labor, that's expense. Oh, there's by type. So I want to edit the columns of the by type view, and I can then see here's all the available fields. Maybe I want to see how much is actual hours. I want to see, all kinds of things. What's been, billed. I don't know. I'm just adding random fields here. So once you check those fields, then you can go back to the top here and click on the display order and say, okay, well, I want actual hours to be before the gross. Expense billed, we'll leave that at the end. That's fine. And so when you say done and save, well, now that column has been added. But again, this is going to control how everyone views the budget. The nice thing, though, is you could go back into those system settings and you can say, sure, this is how I want the company default to be. But again, maybe I have my account managers. When they go into the budget view, I want them to see different columns. So it is nice. You can kind of control it by security group of what you want them to see. Now, I will be honest, most people will just set up a company default because if they don't have access to this page, well, they shouldn't be seeing anything anyway. So I'm not going to worry about what people are not seeing and just focus on the group of people that do view this page. That's typically how we just set up the company defaults. So great question there. Now that does lead me into another area. So knowing that the budget has to be controlled through system settings, let me talk about the schedule real quick. In the project schedule, it's very similar. You would have to go under the more, system settings to edit the columns. And again, this is kind of an admin view of how the system is set up and working. What we have done in a recent update is we have the ability to create what we call column sets. So this way, sure, here's the default schedule that I want everyone to view, but when I enable column sets and I set up the columns the way I want, it'll create an extra drop down here, and I can drop it down and say, oh, let me go to the admin columns. So admins just need to see these columns. Maybe our project managers need to see these columns. So you can have just kind of a quick set of pre-made views that your users can actually flip through without having the ability to edit them or change them. So again, it really comes down to control. We really set it up to have your administrators really setting up how the system should be used. But then, of course, you can extend that a little bit further of, well, here's what I want my users to be able to see and do. Okay, let me go back and see what other questions here. Let's see, on the iPad, why can't we type anything into the search in the right-hand column? I'm not sure, unfortunately. I would have to, know how to reproduce the issue of that you're having with the iPad to help more specifically with that. But if there's any chance you can take like a screenshot or give us some steps to reproduce, we can most certainly follow up with you on that as well. So just if you can, just send that to support@workamajig.com, and we'll follow up with any issues you have with your iPad and let you know what's going on. Scrolling down through my messages here. The tile view. So we brought it up. Okay. In the tile view, you can set it to show the task on the start date through the end date and not just the end date. Let me see if I can understand that real quick. I'm going to go back. So yes, there is a third view from your Today Creatives that we call the tile view. So while I'm not going to be training on that specifically, we actually have a webinar coming up that will get into kind of the agile features, if you will, of schedules and assignments. So that's what this tile view is for. But let's get back to the question here. In the tile view, can you set it to show the task on the start date through the end date, not just the end date? Well, so how this page works, just to give you a quick explanation of how the tile view works, is it's showing you all of the tasks that run through this week. So I'm not just seeing what I have every day. I'm seeing this is what's on my plate this week. That's really what this page is all about. It's not about, okay, on Monday, here's everything I have to work on Monday. On Tuesday, here's everything I have to work on Tuesday. No, this page shows you, here's everything that runs through the week. So what that means is, let's say this task has a start date of 2 weeks ago, but it has a due date of 2 weeks from now. So it's a month-long running task, but it shows up in this page because it runs through this week. So that might be more discussion to have with your PMs or even with your account manager here at Workamajig of, well, what are you trying to accomplish or what are you trying to do? Because this screen is very specific. It's set up to just show you tasks running through this week. So hopefully that kind of helps to clarify that a little bit. Any plans to create column sets for the budget screens? Yeah, that's a great idea, Heather. So if you don't mind, just shoot over that feedback to our support email address, and we'll add that to our enhancement list. That's a good idea, yeah, for the budget view. And last but not least, there's a test there, so that's nothing else. All right, well, very good. So I appreciate everybody being here today. If there's any last minute questions, I'll hang on for a few more moments here. But yeah, feel free to follow up with us with any questions, any feedback. If you're running into any kind of process issues, just generally using the interface, let us know. Again, just let us know your feedback. We're always open to hearing it. We're always kind of making tweaks and adjustments, and definitely following up with the feedback we receive. So. As far as the recording for this webinar, I don't recall if you're going to get an email with a link after. You might. But if you do not know that, you can go to our support site, and you can just look for webinars. And we have a page full of our upcoming webinars and our pre-recorded or past recorded webinars. So this webinar will eventually show up on this page. So you can always do a lookup for that if you don't get any other follow-up after this. Let's see, we got one last question here. Are you able to view the expenses and labors in the estimate in the way they're totaled together similar to how they're in Workamajig Classic. Oh, well, let me go back into my project here then. So if what we're asking for is that budget view, traditionally it would be like, by item. So I think what you're asking is, can we see, by item like we had on the classic side, which would be, here's the labor section, here's the expense section. I'm assuming that's kind of what you're asking for. So yeah, just click through the different views. One note while we're here, because it stands out, is by person. This is actually a new view in the Platinum interface. But keep in mind that this is designed only if you're using a specific type of estimate, or else it's not really going to give you good data. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of different if that's the way you work, but it's not going to show you reliable data if your way is by item. So I'll leave it at that. Let's see, I'll try to answer one more question here. Were you able to answer the question, when a user is 100% completes a task or to-do, can a project owner get notified via email that the item is completed? Oh, okay. Currently, no. There's not a way to email somebody based off of just the task alone being completed. What you could do is you could create a task after that task that the project manager is assigned to. And in that case, there is a system setting. Let me jump into our system setup there. There is a system setting under projects, and it's called auto send assignment complete emails. What that means is when a predecessor task is completed and you are assigned the task after it, you actually will get an email that your task is ready to start. So that would be probably the closest you could get to knowing that that task is been completed, if you're wanting more of like an instant notification. Now, know that you could always create maybe a custom report that looks at project schedules that a certain task was completed within a certain date range. And there's a lot of ways you can use custom reports to find something, but it's not going to be necessarily instant. That would be a report you'd have to run every now and then just to see what's been completed. And that might fall more under, like, I would say, kind of the resource manager or traffic kind of role of you're needing to monitor tasks that are completed, but not what we call reviewed. So again, I don't want to take the thunder from our next webinar that goes over the kind of the resource manager functions a little more. But there are definitely different ways to either process that or handle that if need be. Let's see, Jackie was saying they used to all be in the estimate together. So yes, again, all I can say is, probably some things have changed from, classic to platinum. So if you have specific questions, what you're trying to look for, I would just say a lot of times what I do with my clients is I'll say, send me a screenshot of what you saw in classic, and I'll send you a screenshot of where you look for that in platinum, or just, once we have another training call, I'll kind of walk them through side by side. So, but ultimately, when you are in the project and you have an estimate open, let's see what I got here. I got all kinds of stuff. So you can see, yeah, correct. So you're going to see the labor and expenses total. So what we've done on the estimate side is made an estimate that looks more just kind of what might be more high level, more pleasing to the eye, if you will. It's once you click into the labor and expenses is when you're going to get the more detail of those different things. So, all right. We've actually had several deliverable webinars already. So I would say check out our webinars guide on our support site, and you'll see a couple of different takes on deliverables that you can kind of watch. But I'm sure we'll have more coming up later, especially to go over more of the advanced features at some point. But for now, the deliverable webinars we've done so far are more just going over kind of the default workflow. So you can see we had one just the other day on our past webinars. So. All right, well, very good. So again, I'm going to say this again, I appreciate everyone's time here today. I hope you found this useful. And if you have any other follow-up questions, please feel free to shoot us an email, support@workamajig.com. But I want to say thank you again for joining, and hope you have a great day. All right, take care.